Hey, and welcome to the actual Anarchy podcast show, interview slash not quite a movie. Something else has come up. There's a guest that we have on who wants to talk about a libertarian project that's a free market solution to a problem that many parts of the world are facing. And it's something that you probably don't even think about in your day-to-day life. It's you just throw things away in the bin and they somehow miraculously disappear. And so the project is put together by Justin Nguyen. Is that how you say your name, Justin?
Yep.
Yeah, so he's here to talk about his free market solution to recycling waste. And so Robert's here with me, and we're just kind of see what he's got to talk about. I've got a screen share showing. So Justin, there will be a video associated with this, and it'll be posted to the YouTube. So there's a picture of you and Genevieve, Leah, and Lauren up at the moment on your website here. But why don't you give us a rundown on your project real quickly, and then we'll start diving into some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. What we're doing is we're launching a campaign called Recycle Revolution, and we're crowdfunding this idea to get it off the ground. We are getting into food waste and waste management, and what we really want to do is show people that there are free market solutions to social problems like the environment. A lot of people relegate the care of the environment and the management of waste to municipal and state industries. What we're trying to do is give a concrete example and give shape to the way that an anarchic society would work. Who would take out the trash under anarchy? What would we do? What are the ways? How does anarcho-capitalism solve environmental problems? I think there's a lot of spook out there that make people afraid that if we lived under anarchy, if we lived without a state, that the rivers would be black and all the trash would just be heaping up in piles, and there'd be smoke everywhere, all your kids would have black lungs. And to be quite honest, that's the world that I see under states. And I think
yeah.
I think that the free market has some good ideas, and entrepreneurs have to have the initiative to make money from solving these problems. And I think that what we're doing is we're taking food and we're feeding it to black soldier flies, which is a fly that eats all kinds of food waste. Everything that we would eat, they consume very, very fast, and turning it into animal food. So we're taking that food waste, we're using it as our raw material, so it's not really waste anymore, it's more just blanket leftovers. We're turning it into animal food, and that's something that we can sell, so we're really profiting from food leftovers, and it's not just in the pickup service or anything like that. We're actually taking garbage, taking waste, and making it, converting it, developing it into something productive.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, we know when governments get involved in something and they end up giving essentially monopolies, those industries get really, really lazy and they stop really innovating because they don't have a need to. So this sounds really exciting. What are some of the regulatory issues that you're dealing with? And you're dealing with, you're starting this whole thing in Indonesia, right?
Yes.
So what are some of what are the governments like down there?
Okay, so there's a moderately strong central state. As long as you don't live in the capital, the central state the central government doesn't really affect you. The main trouble that we would get from the central state is when you come into the country. Everything in terms of visa and permitting is all from there, and so it can be it can be moderately difficult to live and work here long term. My wife is Indonesian, and this is where we are building our life, so we're pretty stable here. There's no worry on that end. So that's the main regulatory concern, is getting in. When it comes to startups and market entry, the regulation is more or less free market regulation. And what I mean by that is that it's my responsibility as a business owner to regulate my product. So the way that that works is we will be developing, right now we have understandings, and we're working with a shrimp farm in East Java. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we have a proper nutrient profile. So that means that we know in the food that we produce how much protein, how much calcium, how much of these other substances, of these other compounds are in our food. And that means we lab test it at a university or an independent lab, something like that. Other than that, the market is not regulated at the small to medium-sized level. So it's essentially, once you can get in here, it's essentially free market entry.
So you don't have some giant FDA agency breathing down your neck where you have to get something past them and pay them a premium to approve your product?
No, not at all. If you get big, if you're going to be a big tax cow, then they do have it. But the startup is very easy. So we have to prove to farmers that our product works. We have to prove to the people that are going to buy it that it's got the protein that says it does, and that's the only proof that we need. So it's all on
Beautiful.
us. And if anything happens, if anything bad is with our food or anything, then we're personally liable. We bear that whole responsibility. So, it's not like if we're going to sell, cardboard mixed in with the food or something like that. We get to kind of prove and demonstrate that businesses, even food businesses, can be self-regulating and successful.
That's the way it should be. Do you mind if we get into the kind of the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts a little bit? I mean, my
Sure.
questions stem more along the lines of the actual way you're going to do this. I mean, people, I guess, if they're going to back you on this Indiegogo campaign, they're going to want to know how you're going to be able to do these things and how you envision a company running. So you're taking waste from, say, restaurants and hotels, that sort of thing, or where's your main source of material coming from?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start with restaurants and hotels first. And I can go into a little bit about the step-by-step process. So what we'll do and what we want to do with the money that we raise is we'll buy a pickup truck, and we'll make some garbage cans with our stamp on it, and we have agreements with hotels and restaurants already, and they're totally willing to give us their food waste and put it in a proper container. So we'll give a garbage can. It'll be sort of like in America we have those blue recycling bins, but it'll be ours, and they'll put their food waste in there, and so long as we pick it up, they've been very gracious, and they said, we'll give it to you for free because we pay per kilo for the waste that we already give out, that we pay waste management companies to pick up. So you're really just helping us save money. And from that point, we'll pick it up. We'll bring it to our processing facility where we will mix it and feed it to black soldier flies. Black soldier fly life cycle, how long they eat is about 2 weeks. So you'll feed them every day for 2 weeks, and the product design will have we'll start with 1, and then we'll go to 4, and then 10, and then 100 cubic meter bins that we'll put the food leftovers in and give the black soldier flies a chance to eat it. Once they eat it, they do this really interesting thing that's called self-harvesting. And that's a insect behavior that isn't manifest in other insects, which is one of the things that makes it really interesting. Other protein sources from insects don't do this. When they are of peak nutritional value for us, they will leave, they'll crawl up ramps that are 30 to 45 degrees. They'll crawl up the sides of that looking for a dry, cool, dark place to pupate. And pupating is when they turn into adults. And you can do this, you can design the box and have them have a hole at the top once they crawl up and catch them. So that's one of the things that makes it really easy for them, really easy for us to collect them. Once you collect them, then we'll wash them, dehydrate them, and grind them up into powder, and that will be the protein source. From there, we'll add other ingredients like corn and wheat, depending on what the specific farmer needs. Some chickens some farms that raise chickens for eggs, they need extra protein. Some do for meat, so they need less protein, and so we'll be able to, from that protein base, build whatever animal food that we need. And in terms of this project, we're working with a shrimp farm right now, and they said that he's a family friend of my wife's. They've known each other for years, and he said he's really excited about this, and he's willing to work with us step by step. So if we design something, send it to him, he will test it on a small subset of his population and give us feedback. Does it have too much fat? Is there not enough protein? What can we do to make it optimal? And once we do that, he's willing to buy it directly from us. So that's one of the promising things about this project. So that is the long elevator speech of the nitty-gritty of the direction of our project.
Excellent. I'm excited about I'm always a fan of having the insect world work for us. How does this process, I mean, obviously, as you grow bigger and whatnot and come up with innovations and making it more efficient, it'll become less expensive. But how does it compare at this level to current other methods of creating animal feed?
So we've run all the simulations, and it's actually a lot cheaper. And the way that we're building it is we're doing it by price, and we're saying, okay, can we make money? So, for example, the main competitor to what we're doing is fish meal. That's most of the protein meal in all of the world comes from fish meal. And the price of fish meal is steadily increasing. It's also very unstable. So, for example, 2 years ago, the price of fish meal was approaching $2,500 a ton. And then slowly after time, it went back down to $1,200, and then it went back up to $1,800. So it's quite unstable, but it's always increasing. And that's because the tropical storm El Nino that's in South America really disturbs the fisheries and wipes out a lot of the fish population. And also, the fish that aren't raised in fisheries come from the ocean, come from wild catch. And those fish are becoming more scarce. It's becoming a little more difficult. And so we know that as things become more scarce, the price is increasing. And as the price increases, that incentivizes us to get in. And because the black soldier fly eats food waste, it makes it very, very easy for us to profit from it. There's no breakthrough technology we need to invest in. There's no really capital infrastructure in terms of hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment. There are people who are environmentally friendly who just make a small container and do this at their house. So there's no electricity investment. There's some things that you need, like we'll need a truck to pick it up. We'll need to make some garbage bins. We'll have to work back and forth with the shrimp farmer to make the food, and those will be where we spend most of our money. We'll have to buy some things like a grinder and a dehydrator and stuff like that, but those are pretty cheap. You can find most of those for the size that we're doing for under $1,000.
Talk to me a little bit about the life cycle of the black soldier fly. Are you going to be? You obviously can't harvest 100% of the larva, right? And you need some to repopulate. Are you harvesting all of the? I mean, what percentage of the larvae can you harvest, and what percentage do you need to keep? How many times do they reproduce in a given life cycle? That sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. So they have a life cycle that is about 3 weeks, and they become from adults. They live for 5 to 8 days. They don't eat anything. All they do is procreate and die. And from there, then the eggs go, and we are hoping to set aside 5% of the prepupa to set aside for population sustainability. So what we want to do is take away 5%. I've talked to some local small-scale farms that are doing this for their own. There are some farms that are raising black soldier flies to feed them to their own pigs. So it's kind of like a closed circle, sustainable farm type of thing. And they take 2%, and the academic research says if you want to maintain a population, you need to set aside 2%. And we're setting aside, my plan is to set aside 5% so that we can kind of grow at a more steady pace. And that can be tweaked. But so most of it will be set aside for the protein production, about 95%.
Wow, so you're getting a good yield then. You don't necessarily need to, and you could seriously grow the operation very rapidly if you wanted to with that many eggs being laid, I guess, per female.
Yeah, they develop very, very fast. So I do it at my house because I feel like I need to learn about their life cycle, not just in academia and reading about it. So I've been raising them at my house, and it's barely manageable. They develop and grow so fast that I mean, I put way more money into it out of pocket than I thought. I thought they would grow a lot slower. Well, I haven't really, I'd only read about it, and I thought 2% is, that doesn't seem like that much. But one female can lay 500 to 1,200 eggs. And of course, you're not going to get 100% yield on those eggs, but that's a pretty high. If you, start with 500 females all laying eggs, you can see from there how fast that could grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Justin, when you've got these flies, are they just like little piranhas? Are they just eating all of the waste down to essentially nothing? Or how does that work?
Yeah, that's what they do. They eat, so you put in, depending on, they can eat about 10 times their waste a day. So if you have a kilo of the larva, you can fit up to about 10 kilos of waste every day. And they eat it pretty much, I mean, sometimes they eat, if they're, feeling hungry or whatever, I don't want to attribute personalities to them, but if they're feeling hungry, they can eat it really, really fast. I mean, as fast as like 18, 20 hours, not just a whole day. And they're like little piranhas, and you put the food in there, and then you go back to check it the next day, and it's gone. They have there's time-lapse videos on YouTube that show, it's like 1,000 larvae versus 2 fish, and they run the time-lapse, and it's just like gone. They are like mini piranhas, and what they leave behind, so when it passes through their guts, what it leaves behind is this black soil thing, and you can actually use that as a soil amendment, and you can sell it to nutrient-deficient farmers. So there's another mode of profitability coming from the soldier flies. It's not just the protein, but so what happens with the flies is you can convert about 25% of all of the food waste into protein. And then that remaining 75% becomes a nitrogen-rich soil amendment that you can't sell it for a lot per unit weight, but you sell a lot of it, and you can start to be profitable in that area too. You can sell for, it's maybe like 2-3 cents a pound, but if you're taking in, tons, literally tons of food waste, you can sell that, and it's perfect to be in Indonesia, in the Southeast Asian region, because a lot of the soil is nitrogen deficient. So we can also make money and give back to the community using that soil amendment.
Yeah, and I heard your interview with Tom Woods and also with the boys from the Scottish Liberty podcast, and I think I heard you discuss how this type of fly is not a vector for disease, unlike the common housefly and many other insects, and so that makes this a safer alternative or a safer operation to have, around foods and in soils and as a food product for other animals.
Yeah, so the thing that sets them apart is that they're not a vector of disease, and that means they don't spread diseases. They're weak flyers, they hate light, and they're antisocial, which means once they become adults, they're not buzzing around flying in your food, going from here to there to here to there. They literally live in their own area, they procreate, and then after a few days, they're dead. So that's what sets them apart. There has been research done. A lot of people don't know that the common housefly, that's also very high in protein. And you, in theory, could do something like you're doing with black soldier flies with the housefly because they have about the same protein concentration. There's not a lot of calcium in the common housefly, but you could use it for protein, and you could do something with that. But the problem is that if you did that, your risk is exponentially higher because of raising them. They also don't have the self-harvesting feature, so you have to figure out a way to take them out from their food. Black soldier flies don't lay the eggs in the food. They lay it in like a corrugated cardboard or something like that. So from the very beginning, they're away from the food and they're not spreading diseases, which is what makes them actually industrially viable. Common houseflies aren't industrially viable because you can't control, or it's very difficult to control where they're going and how they spread diseases.
All right, very good. This reminds me of our episode 30 with Adam Kokesh, where we talked about idiocracy, and the whole movie is set in the future, and his pod where he's sleeping in is on this mound of garbage, this giant mountain of garbage that has this giant collapse mudslide of the garbage coming back into the town because they forgot how to manage their garbage, and because everyone was dumbed down. And it sounds like your solution is exactly the opposite of that. It's how to manage garbage more efficiently and more effectively and profitably, so that there's not a huge amount of waste in landfills. I've heard that landfills, because so many people are composting, that there's not enough nitrogen within the landfills themselves any longer to properly break down a lot of the other trash and other elements that are part of that. And I think that's a talk by Floyd Lilly that I can put a link in our article about that, as well as a link to our episode about the Lorax, which we did for Earth Day, and that was basically debunking how that whole story is a socialist nonsense about the watermelon, the green on the outside, red on the inside. It's basically just a mode of control, an attempt to have government have more powers and more control over people's activities.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. They use that. It's the municipal governments, the cost-plus industries that send all this food to landfills that make this huge problem. They're using land. Food waste breaks down and releases methane gas, which is 20 times more dangerous to the ozone than carbon gas, even though it is less concentrated. But they use that, so they're creating this problem. Then they use that as a pretext and say, oh, and there's this and there's that. And so we need to restrict consumption, and we need to have you reduce what you're doing and all of these things. And I just don't see, they're fighting the losing battle on this, right? Because they want people to reduce their consumption. And the only way you can get people to reduce consumption is by force. People don't want to do that. So this kind of sidesteps the whole issue. And we're saying, you know, the more you consume, we down the line will make money from that. So please consume more. And we can make money and do it, you know, in a, I don't mean this in the statist way, but in a socially responsible way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it's very, yeah.
Very excellent. No, this all sounds really cool. So you mentioned that there was maybe some work of convincing some customers to accept fly larva feed as opposed to this fish feed is what they're used to buying. I imagine if you produce a higher quality product at a lower price, their mind will quickly change. But are you facing have you dealt with any of that yet? Because I imagine you need to examine your market before you can really convince people to invest in this sort of thing, yeah?
Right. That is going to be a big problem when we take on the Western markets. But insect protein is very socially acceptable in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia, so we haven't run into any problem like that. Just like you said, if we can produce an insect meal, an insect protein, cheaper and at a higher quality, or at least the same quality,
yeah,
they'll buy it. There's no social stigma around using insects because it's interesting, and we're kind of a few degrees separated away from our food, but the evolutionary biological food for shrimp, for fish, for chickens, they're grubs and flies, and they eat all these things. Fish don't eat fish. Not in, you know, bigger fish eat small fish, but they're not carnivorous species. You know, chickens don't eat fish. They don't. So it's actually kind of going back to their natural food in a way.
I like it. I think a lot of people behind that.
I have a suggestion for you, and that is to take the old Orwellian trick and just use a different name for it, especially in the Western markets. Because if you call it, you know, black soldier fly, I'm sure that's going to be a bit off-putting, even for people who are in the animal feed industry. So maybe just come up with a more benign name and, you know, kind of do some brand marketing and use that as your approach, and you might see a little bit of a, I don't know, more success in that realm.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Do you have a product name in mind?
No, we don't. We don't have a name yet.
You have plenty of time.
Still, we're still kind of developing, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. You can't, if you're like, oh yeah, come try this insect meal, probably 99% of people in America are going to be like, is that what you fed the chicken? Because I don't know if I want to eat that.
Right.
Yeah, I would go something along the lines of it's organic and it's the source of the source, right? So like you just said, chickens eat it, fish eat it, all these other animals eat it. And so use something along those lines where you're saying you're going all the way back to nature, to the origins in a very organic fashion, and kind of work maybe from that angle. I don't know if that'll spark any ideas for you, but that's just kind of what I had rolling around in my lumpy head over here.
I think that's really smart.
Yeah, man, I'm digging on your situation here. I really like everything you're saying. I like your logo. I think that's appropriate. I think it's a ingenious idea. I hope it works out for you. I know you've got a long ways to go on your Indiegogo, but I hope people get on there and support you. So
Yeah, and just one thing for anybody who's thinking about supporting us, it's, we set a pretty high goal, and we do have a long ways to go. But the good news is that we are already starting, and so because we're starting so small scale, you just start with 1 cubic meter box for the bin for the flies and grow them, and you just start slowly and you grow it slowly. So whatever contributions that we get will go to good use, and we'll start if we have $50 or $500 or $5,000 or $50,000. That's enough to start. It just has to do with how small scale are you going to start. So, if you're checking it out and you're thinking, well, I don't know if they're not going to meet their goal, we don't have to meet our goal to get started. We are going to keep preaching the black soldier fly, and we're also going to put some action with what we're doing. And I think over time people will start to see, and it'll start to, because this is such a new idea that, it's also kind of abstract, because if I told you we were going to start our own road company, or if I told you we were going to, create our own country, or, whatever kind of wild, not undoable, but, out of the box idea, you would probably have already heard it or something like that. But I think the key for true anarchy is to change the minds of people. And the way that we do that is we have to start small. We can't just suddenly break out with our own national defense plan, not because that's incorrect, but because 98% of people can't understand that. But if we start with the environment and waste management, and we start to give really good examples, I think that can build into a whole movement, and really anarcho-capitalists and libertarians can kind of hijack the environmental movement, because we actually are the true friends of environmentalists. We really are. If you follow private property rights to the end, we're the true environmentalists, because we believe that it's everybody's responsibility to protect their own. And I think, people get on board with that, and libertarians and ANCAPs can really understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to note, is that government is the largest and most egregious polluter in the world, especially when you consider the military operations, and that you're right, private property and respect for that is the right way to address these types of situations, because if somebody is polluting into your area, then you have a stake in going and getting that rectified, or you have a stake on your side of not aggressing against someone else with your pollutants. And we've got a great lecture by Murray Rothbard about this, about conservatism, conservation, and so I'll post that also as a link down in our article that we're going to post with this video.
That's awesome. Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, when nobody owns it, nobody has a reason to really take care of it. So private property is really the way to go. So let's say you get a couple of these boxes going. Do you need to have a ton before you make your first sale, or can you start selling it in smaller pieces? I mean, how long before you get going here? I know your market, you have 5 days left on your Indiegogo, but I imagine you've been kind of going a little bit, but you're really wanting to ramp things up. How long before you start selling something?
Well, we have a target of 1 year, but I want it to take about 6 to 8 months. We talked with the farmer, and he said when we had made the Indiegogo page, we were thinking about starting at the scale of about $50,000 investment. So we talked to him, and he said that as long as we can make it, he will buy it from us, and if it takes a while to build up, that's fine. So we, in a way, already have our first customer, and his farm is pretty big. He buys 6 tons of food every day to feed his shrimp. So I think the focus for us would be to meet that level. And then once we do that, then we can invest in marketing and branding and that other kind of stuff. But in terms of getting our first customer, we're kind of already locked down on that.
Well, it sounds like you got a customer that could essentially keep you in business for a long time. I mean, 6,000 a day.
Yeah.
Did you say 6 tons a day?
Yeah, 6 tons.
6 tons a day. Yeah. So, okay, well, that's great. So you can really get going through him and then branch out from there once you outgrow him. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, in honor of Shark Week, I think you're going to need a bigger truck. No, but very cool. Well, hey, Justin, why don't you give our audience the links and all of that on how they can get a hold of more information about you and how to support your Indiegogo campaign. I know Tom put a link together for you, and if you want to just sling that, I'm sure that would be fine as well. So you have the floor. How can people support you?
Okay, so people can support us by going to our Indiegogo page. And yeah, so I did the show with Tom Woods, and he made a redirect. So you can just go to tomwoods.com/fly, and that'll take you directly to our Indiegogo page. Or you can visit our website, and you can get more technical information about our project, the design, Black Soldier Flies. You can see the press that we've done, the interviews and the articles that we've published, and some other things that people have written about us. You can go to Nguyen Solutions, and that's my last name. It's Nguyen Solutions.org. We have a link to our Indiegogo page and all the other information that you might need. There's also an email on there, so if you have any extra questions, you can email me directly, and I try and have a fast turnaround, especially with our, anarcho-capitalist and libertarian brothers and sisters. I really want to help get the word out. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. And the email you can find is on the website.
All right, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and it's really great to see Anarchy in action. That was one of our promises to ourselves when we first started this site for actual anarchy. We were like, oh, we're going to showcase instances of actual anarchy out in the world, but we've primarily just stuck to movies and analyzing them from a Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist perspective, though we do have about 800 articles on there now that are ranging from all sorts of things related to liberty and freedom and anarchy, Bastiat, Hayek, Mises, Rothbard, all sorts of stuff on there. So, but thank you for bringing us back to the thing that we thought we were going to do way at the beginning. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad that was your mission from the beginning, is to show anarchy in action.
All right, Robert, any final words from you, my man?
No, nothing. I just want to thank Justin for coming on and doing this little mini-sode. I wish him the best. I'd also like to have him on as a guest if he ever wants to talk about a movie. That'd be great. Other than that, support him if you can. Support him if you like seeing anarchy in action. We vote with our dollars in this world, and we give those dollars to things we want to see more of. So if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, float him some cash, and I'm sure he'll be a good steward with those dollars and get out there and make your life better.
All right,
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have you on for The Fly or Lord of the Flies, perhaps. Maybe you will be the Lord of the Flies.
I will be.
All right. Well, Justin, thank you very much. This has been the Actual Anarchy podcast with a special Anarchy in Action episode. So you can check this out on YouTube and at our website, actualanarchy.com. So thank you guys very much for joining us, and thank you, Justin. Best of luck.
Yep, thanks.